Hi everyone, and welcome to Elite Rugby SandC podcast. First off, if you haven't already, sign up and join Elite Rugby SandC today. We provide you all your strength, conditioning, speed, and recovery needs. You can try before you buy, so try our 7-day $7 trial to get a taste of what we offer here at Elite Rugby SandC. You can sign up to our newsletter and receive free bonus content each and every single week. So take your game to the next level, become a beast, and join Elite Rugby SandC today. Today I'm joined on the podcast with strength and conditioning coach Emily Wilson. Emily currently works for Southern District Rugby Club, looking after junior and senior programs. Emily also works in athletics as a throws coach, working with a whole range of different athletes. If you want to learn more about Emily, check out episode 12 of Elite Rugby SandC podcast. In this episode, Emily provides a wealth of knowledge on training female athletes. We discuss why tracking menstrual cycles is important, how to create a positive and safe environment when discussing menstrual cycles and periods, how to use the menstrual cycle to your advantage, and how to manage your training, and much, much more. This was a great episode, and I appreciate Emily taking time out to speak with me today. I know all listeners will get a lot out of this episode, so enjoy. So g'day Emily, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm going well, thanks. How's the weather up there in Sydney?
Not too cold, but it's been freezing all week, so it's a nice bit of relief with the sun, not so much rain and wind, but yeah, it's been good.
That's good. It's to our listeners who have been listening in, it's a bit of cold down here, and but it's all good. Get to wear nice jumpers, get to eat some nice warm food, which is nice. So today we're going to be talking about the female athlete and how to train them more specifically with S&C. So before we get into the specific questions, Emily, do you want to talk about the menstrual cycle and the different stages and what happens over each stage as well?
Yeah, sure. So the most simple way I explain it to people is how Maisie Hill, she's an author of Period Power, explains it that our cycle is split up into 4 weeks over a hypothetical 28 days. And it follows the seasons of like our seasonal changes. So the first 5 days are your bleeding days, and that's usually winter. So you're going to feel like you want to slow down, hibernate, not do so much. And that's when you're going to feel like you're going to curl up into your blanket and say goodbye to the world. So I think hibernating, recharging your energy supplies. Once you finish bleeding, after winter, we go into spring, and that's when you're going to start feeling your energy come all high, and you're going to feel confident to do everything, which is like what most spring activities is. And that's because your estrogen, your female hormone, is spiking up. So that's when you're going to feel superwoman on the field or in the gym and whatnot. So that would last up until from day 6 to day 14. On day 14, an egg will detach from your ovaries and come down your fallopian tubes to basically be like, hey, I'm ready to be fertilized. Let's make a baby. That is in your summer period. So I think summer activities that you're spending time with people, you're going to want to have that interaction because, again, you're fertile. So evolutionary speaking, you're going to want to try and find a mate. So you're going to be very pleasant around people at that time. Your estrogen is still kind of there. Progesterone, your other hormone, is coming up, which kind of calms you down a little bit, hence why you're pleasant around people. And that's kind of when all your energy levels are hopefully simmering, that you can kind of bring that peak of energy into your summer phase. Because again, spring and summer activities are where you've got your most energy, you're most likely to do stuff. When it hits day 21, your summer period is slowly coming to an end and we're heading into autumn. That's when majority of the time, that's when your bitchiness or your I hate you kind of mentality comes out, and you're very passionate about certain things. You got poop filters on and kind of hate the world. That is autumn, where we've got the horrible rain, wind, all that kind of stuff. So that's when your estrogen and progesterone has dropped because you're not fertilized, and basically your body's saying, screw you, let's get rid of the nest and start back again in winter. So that's a very simple way I describe it to people, and usually the weather changes can mimic what happens with your hormones and your energy kind of periods, and it's the easiest way for them to, and males as well, to understand what goes on over like the classic 28 days.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like the analogies of to the seasons, and yeah, just like you said, it makes it easier to understand, and yeah, that's awesome. So why is tracking the menstrual cycle important, and does it have a role to play with performance?
So I like to see tracking your menstrual cycle as your RPE scale. So if you are a person that has no period pain, no cramps, no issues with their periods whatsoever, and some of you are probably thinking that's unheard of, it actually is true. You are healthy, everything is working fine, and you're not overtraining, you're resting enough, it's perfect. So if you're tracking all your symptoms and what your normal is, if a fluctuation happens, that's a bit of a red flag to be like, oh, should I slow down? If I change my training too dramatically, am I eating enough and sleeping enough? So it is so important to make sure that your periods are normal for you, to know that you are healthy and tracking well. Because obviously if your period disappears and things start to become red flags, you're going to go into what's called relative energy deficiency syndrome, which is the old female athlete triad, where you lose your period for 3 months, you're overtrained, you've got stress fractures. It's quite a negative time to be in. So if you are tracking your cycle, you are pushing that risk further away, and you're actually knowing that you are healthy, fully functioning and whatnot. If you do have pain, you can track how certain interventions are helping with your pain, and then hopefully if that pain pops up again later, you now know how to treat it. So especially if you've got game day and your period turns up, oh crap, what do I do? You already know you certain things to kind of minimize the amount of red flags. So I feel it's really important for that, because especially if you're a teenager where they don't come up whenever, if you've got your patterns slowly appearing, you will know, oh, my period's coming, it's okay, everything's normal, I know how to resolve this. And then when it comes to performance, it's a bit harder in a team environment, because there's no myth that all females sync up. So basically you could have girls at different phases on their cycle throughout the whole team, and it's more of a good awareness for them that they know how to look after themselves. And again, hopefully it's a comfortable environment for them to come up and be like, hey, I have my period, or hey, I've got cramping because I'm ovulating, I might not be able to be my best, can I have limited time today, or something like that. It can help with performance in that sense in a team environment. If you're an individual athlete, you could hope that you've got a carnival on during your spring summer phases, because then your estrogen's at peak and you should be able to perform better. Or if you perform better when you're pissed off, that autumn week, or rogue week as I call it, would be the better week to put a comp on if you're looking for qualifiers and whatnot. So it has its role in certain situations, but in terms of it being your sixth vital sign of health, that is where it's really important, because obviously if you're healthy, you perform better as well. So yeah, that's how I kind of see it as important.
Awesome. So what are some interventions that athletes can do to help just downregulate the symptoms that could be negative or positive? So what are some interventions that you have found in your experience that have worked?
So I did a lot of self-experimentation on myself, because when I read that it could be pain-free all the time, I was like, oh, I've noticed some periods where I would have that but then lose it. So I went back and I looked at in your week leading up to your first to your period, so your autumn phase, you want to prioritize more sleep. You want to try and reduce what you're doing to then allow that kind of those days into like your PMS days will then disappear, because you're prioritizing sleep and that self-care rest kind of mentality, because then you're going to have more energy to kind of deal with what's going on. That's how I've seen it. That's what the literature says. Aside from that, also, if you do your rest into your period and the first 5 days of your actual bleeding phase, if you compete, train, work at 70% across those days, you will have no cramps. You should have more energy throughout your 28 days, as opposed to, you'll peak up to day 12 and then have nothing for the rest of the cycle. So people are probably listening thinking that, how can I do it at 70% when I've got to do A, B, and C? The easiest thing is, if you're an individual athlete, we can monitor that week for you and decrease it by periodization. Again, if you're very regular, you can easily do that long term. If you're someone that, again, I work for myself, so it's very easy to reduce the amount of clients I have on those days, or I sit down and do them. So make sure I pick clients that don't need me to be involved so much, so I can kind of sit back and just speak rather than come over to them all the time. So then that way I still am working, but it's 70% of what I need to do. And then say my big training day comes up on that week, I will try and have a lower day, maybe before and after it, and get more sleep. So those are some things. Like sleep is probably going to be spoken about a lot during this podcast. That's going to be the key for getting rid of most of your symptoms, because again, your body is refreshed. It's had the time to kind of recover and just get on with the next day. So sleep is the best one you can potentially, we as coaches can prescribe to you guys. The other strategy you can do, a dietitian would come in and talk to you about. It's beyond our scope and obviously beyond the scope of this podcast, but certain foods help with the inflammatory process that goes on, which causes the cramps. So Dr. Stacey Sims says that there's a cure that she's got in the 5 days before you bleed, where it's aspirin, magnesium, omega-3, and a few other things that if you have that in the days leading up to it, you'll have no PMS and no cramps. So she's found that research is in her book, Raw, and then a dietitian can actually come up with one that's specifically tailored for you. And not only will it fix that, it'll fix the breast pain that you get because you've got low in iodine. You've got bloating would also be helped with the diet as well. So a dietitian can fix all your symptoms that way, and also adding more sleep and fixing your schedule around the patterns you've noticed from, monitoring your symptoms over multiple cycles.
That's awesome. In sort of sport and say rugby, it's sort of push through the pain. Is that the same thing in terms of the menstrual cycles? Like if you have athletes who experience some bad symptoms and they're trying to push through it, like, no, I'll be right, I'm going to push through it. Should they, or should they really listen to their body and say, no, you're not going to be training today, maybe go home and get some sleep?
I sound very harsh when I say train through it, because what if it happens on game day? What if it happens at your grand final? So when you think about it, in a team sport, this is hard because you could feel like you're letting your teammates down, you're letting your coach down, and you might be a key player that plays on the whole time that no one can really be subbed with or whatnot. So you have to have that hard decision of training's supposed to be harder than a game, theoretically. So if you can get through training, you should better get through a game. So that's kind of how I start that conversation with them that way. And then if we talk through their symptoms, depending on what it is, obviously if it's super bad, go see a doctor to see what actually is going on, because that's where you should go first. We can't really diagnose what's actually going on. But if they go to the doctor and we can find out a solution to it, then we should be able to play through it. Or it just means like you have ibuprofen beforehand, or whatever your preferred painkiller is beforehand, you should be sweet. Or running on, you've got if you live with a hot pack on you for those days, there's hot patches that you can stick on. So you could wear them on game day and kind of push through it that way. So yes, you can kind of say go home if you've had a big day at work and they know they're not going to get out of it, and you're like that's your one-on-one S&C session. But if it's a team environment, you might just tell them, okay, we'll drop back certain things. Don't exert yourself too much, but still be involved, because again, you're letting a teammate down. You might have a big role. It's again case by case situation. So go sort out what's going on first and then push through, because again, what would you do if it was grand final? Like those are the kind of things, like, yes, you do push through it, but we will address it, see what actually is the underlying cause, and then hopefully we can get it back. Because like our poor friends who have endometriosis, there's nothing you can really do about that, but they may still love sport. Because like it's a bit hard for like a male, they've always had their opportunity to play sport, whereas these girls, it might be their first time having that contract, and this could be their debut game. They will get through anything just so they can run out in that jersey, so to speak. So I feel like, yes, they have that mentality already in themselves, like, this is my opportunity, I'll do it. But if we can make it a little bit more comfortable when those opportunities come up, it will be, massive rewards later on. So that's why it's like you do your education first. Oh, I've notified something's wrong. How do I fix it? Okay, I'm better gonna have better playing because I'm not going to be worrying about it anymore. Yeah, so I would generally push through it. All my athletes that have that, especially the throwers, I'm like, well, what if it's nationals? What if it's the Olympics? You're just not going to turn up.
Yeah.
So you generally push through it, and you should be able to put your strategies on either side to kind of bookend it. Like, you can get through it, and we'll just do this later on. We'll do this beforehand. So it's a bit different now. We know what's going on, but before you just do it.
No, I think that's some great advice. And yeah, you sort of just got to remember that you are playing a team sport if you are playing rugby, and try and manage it the best you can and just do the best by you and also for the team as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how can coaches help create a positive menstrual cycle / period experience for their athletes?
Yeah, that's a big one. So I make sure that you are very comfortable with the topic. And I know it's a lot harder for guys because obviously they might not have experienced it before, or if they do have sisters, it might not be spoken about at home. So if you are, the more comfortable you are with the topic, the more comfortable they're going to be, because then they know they can raise a question at training and no one's going to be like, oh my God, why did you say that? Like, that's gross. So one thing you can say is like, it's easy for me because I was like, oh, how are we feeling? Like, if you need pads or tampons, I've got them in my bag if you come and see me. Like, just in case you forgot or they appear randomly, because I work with kids a lot, I've always got to have them on deck. That's a good way for them to be like, okay, she's cool with this kind of topic. And any kind of conversation I can put up, I kind of drop it to be like, oh, hey, how you feeling? If they feel really flat, I'm like, okay, I don't mean to alarm you, but are you getting your period soon? So that's the question I kind of start saying, because if I'm coming up with it, then they're going to know it's a little bit more safer. And the other thing is when you talk about it, look them in the eye. Don't kind of look down at the ground that, oh, like we're talking periods, I can't look at them straight. So the more confident, again, with your open body language and looking at them, the more confident they're going to be. And it's really good. So with our Waratahs Academy at Southern Districts, I started off our season program with a period talk. So I'd been with the girls already for 2 weeks on previous programs, so they're already comfortable with me. And we had a talk about it. And every time they asked a question or answered a question, they got a lolly. So that really encouraged the kind of dialogue that we're allowed to talk about it. And even though we had male coaches in the room, we had a safe word if they wanted them to get out of the room to ask a question. It was a very kind of nice environment that way. So yeah, that's kind of be the way to talk about it. Make sure it's really known and like, hey, you need a pad, here you go. And don't try and cover it up with like, oh, Auntie Flo or Raggedy Ann's turned up. Just say, do you have you got your period? It's okay. And if you can get the other coaches, the males on board as well, it's going to make them a little bit more comfortable. And I'm not necessarily saying you need a female staff member around that environment, but it does make it a little bit easier because they can just come up and fire off questions left, right, and center. But that would be one way you can do it and be like, hey, if you need to have that moment. And like making sure the uniform pants are a dark color is also very, very helpful if you can do that. Because again, if certain products aren't fitting them properly, they'll leak. Or again, if they're not expecting their period, it will leak. So avoid white, people. So yeah, that'll be another, if you have control over that, another environmental consideration to do. Yeah.
I think that's awesome. Having some spare tampons and pads around can just make it just more accessible and just sort of a easier environment instead of like, yeah, just like you said, sort of pushing it to the side. It's hush hush type of thing. So if you can be open about and have those products around, it's not going to do anything bad. It's going to make the environment a lot better. And I'd also say another thing is having specialty bins right next to the toilet as well can make female athletes a lot more comfortable with that aspect as well. That's something I noticed with one of the old gyms I was at. We didn't have one. And then it wasn't brought to my attention until one of the coaches said we probably should have one. I was like, oh, sorry, I never thought about that. And it's definitely a big thing that all gyms should have, and same thing with high performance centers as well. So
we're very lucky.
So how does training need to be managed during the menstrual cycle?
So there's a few ways you can go about this. You can spend the time, if you are very lucky to have an individual athlete that's got no kind of prior commitments with other team stuff, to modulate it according to the phases of the cycle. If you do not have that possibility, don't worry about it. Like, it's okay, because remember, any phase is happening on game day. So there is going to be a point where you're going to have to compete under a certain hormonal condition anyway. So there are some ways you can do it. So you can have this simple, like there are round up days, there are round down days. So Dr. Leanne Munro, who's in charge of Cycling Australia, has this philosophy, like, she doesn't even do it specifically periodized for the week or for the whole cycle. It's more like, you feel energetic today, we've noticed that in your numbers, you want to go for that extra set, do you want to go for that extra kilo? So they might be in their spring summer phase, but you haven't made such a big deal about it. You've just gone, let's go push it a little bit more. And then obviously if they're in their winter or autumn phases and you've noticed they're a bit sluggish and they've made it known, you can be like, all right, let's back it off a bit, or let's change an exercise, or you do it more on the fly based on how they're feeling, because some people may not have any negative impacts from their cycle at all. So you can just keep going and wouldn't have to change anything, because if it's not broken, no point fixing it. So like my training for my own, even though I'm very aware of what's going on in my body, just is not tied up with my cycle, because again, I could be competing on a day where I'm not ready. Like I should have peaked for this, but then my period might have come early. So you kind of more go off how they're feeling. I feel is a good kind of thing, because you're getting more athlete buy-in and you're actually having that conversation with them if you have that opportunity. If you are in a team environment and you have the time to have us individual programs instead of the cookie cutter one, go for it, and I'll explain what I would suggest for that. But based on your time and resources, what do you have available and how much of a connection you have with that person, it is going to become something a bit difficult. It's more better for them to just like track, be well known of it. And if you know they're in their autumn phase, go out in the field and be like, focus on your technique rather than completing the reps at a time, because that then again is already periodized, giving them a bit of a deload rather than trying to map it all out with all your 50 million kids and girls, and they're all in different cycles. So that would be the best way in terms of a global approach to it. If you're very fortunate to have that more individualized style, again, everyone is each their own opinion. Some research says this way works, others say different things. Again, it's what works for the athlete at the end of the day. So some I've trialed that on their, if they're going to start a new block, I would usually start that off in their winter phase, so when they're bleeding. So it's a new stimulus, but if it's, even though it's the same exercise, it's just different weight change on that block, it's still kind of like a light load at a 70% that we've talked about that they could complete. Then when they go into their spring and summer phases, that's when the estrogen is pumping. They recommend to do most of your lifting then to get the most bang for your buck. That would be your week 2, week 3 of that loading phase. So you should be able to target it then. And then when you're on that autumn week, that'd be like your week 4 where you drop it anyway. So mentally they're going to be fried. They're going to be physically sluggish. So that should work well for them there. But it depends on how you want to load. It depends on the competition schedule, but that is kind of like a general progression some people suggest to do. Or another alternative is you start your program on the autumn week, so week 4 of your cycle. So again, that's a low week. If it's a brand new program, that stimulus won't overfire them too much. When they go into their period week, so winter, that's week 2 of the cycle. And if most of their energy and estrogen peak is in their spring, that then week 3 will fit into that. So that's another alternative way you can do it. Both I've seen results, but again, it depends on the person, how regular they are. Yeah, you got to deal with the biology of that kind of thing. So it's a little bit harder. So you may get it right, but then their period's a week late. So what do you do? So that's where when Dr. Leanne Munro said that, I was like, oh, that's actually probably a better way, because again, if you can't really communicate when they're on their period, especially as a male, and they don't really feel comfortable, you can still go, okay, why don't we push this a bit more? Because then you think they're in that phase where the estrogen is pumping. So that way you'll be able to find a little bit more, even in a team environment, be like, okay, you're smashing it today, put more kilos on the bar, or let's go run another sprint. I feel like you can push that far, like another 5 more meters. But yeah, again, research is out there. Be very careful with it, because if they don't specifically state that they're on hormonal contraception or they're all natural, it's again 2 different systems, because one's ovulated, different hormone environment compared to on hormonal contraception. And then at the same time, menstruators don't ovulate every cycle. So then again, sometimes progesterone hasn't come out. So then again, it's a whole different training environment. So again, I feel like if it's a case day-by-day situation, do you feel pumped? Let's go. There's your round-up days. If you don't, it's okay. We'll back it off a little bit. Yeah.
Awesome. I think it comes back to like communication and how comfortable your athlete feels with you, and vice versa, how comfortable you feel with your athlete. So if you can clearly communicate that, have your, say, period talk at the start of your season. If it's starting a new preseason block, bang, you're having that talk, and even in season as well, bang, you're having that talk again. And yeah, if you can clearly communicate, then you can best sort out what way you want to go around your training, and then try and maximize that training as well. So yeah, it comes back to that communication and that trust between player and coach.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Hi everyone, we just wanted to take a break from this episode. We hope you are enjoying this episode so far, and also all the content we have produced. We appreciate all the support from our listeners and followers so far. If you haven't already, sign up to Elite Rugby SandC newsletter today. We provide you free, exclusive content each and every single week to our subscribers. Link in the bio. Remember to like, subscribe, and share Elite Rugby SandC on social media to all your friends and families. So thanks again for your support, and now back to the episode.
So are there certain types of training best suited for different stages of the cycle, as you just alluded to?
So in your follicular phase, which is your first 2 weeks, your estrogen is pumping. That's kind of like our version of testosterone, how it is for a guy. So those first 2 weeks will be where, if they are comfortable and they work well in that environment, to pump up as much strength training, strength building, power phase then. So that's why I said it could be like your weeks 2, 3 on your 3 up, 1 down cycle will be your bleeding week, and the following week your spring week. If you find that their better energy can kind of trickle out a little bit more, you can kind of push it into that summer week. So again, very individualized, it works that way. When they hit the start of the luteal phase, so once they've ovulated, that first kind of week, they're more injury prone. So that could be a good deload week for change of direction reps. So you wouldn't really do much change direction then, because they've got that high injury risk, and you can kind of back it off a little bit and hopefully protect it for them, maybe do different stuff, like more pre-planned stuff, so they can control their landing. Again, because all our ligaments become more flexy. So it's not just the knee, it could be your shoulder, your back, your pelvis, everything becomes a little bit more risky, which is the whole ACL, AFL debacle that happened a few years ago. So those are the kind of things you could do, but again, it's very person dependent and all that kind of stuff. There's more research coming out saying that aerobic training doesn't really matter depending on the phase of the cycle you're on. We're still very much in that infancy phase with what is actually beneficial for the person. Because again, if you're on hormonal contraception, completely different environment to someone who is all natural, and also depends on their sport. So if they never need to really, like a thrower doesn't really need to do much, just, those 2 weeks of the follicular phase, I'll load them up more, maybe do more throwing reps at a certain weight compared to all the other weeks, potentially. But like we've said at the start, you could compete at any phase of your cycle. So yes, you can get a bit of bang for your buck from it if you are looking for that missing piece. But remember, at the end of the day, you are going to be competing in any condition that you could come across.
Awesome. Yeah. So what's the best way for female athletes to track their menstrual cycles? And would you also suggest for coaches to add in tracking into their wellness questionnaires if they do that?
100%. I think I'll get to the coach bit first. 100%. I think coaches should include it, because as I mentioned, if you can find out those girls are in their autumn week, you can go up to them and be like, hey, I know you're already fatigued and really mentally fried. Just focus on the completion of the rep, necessarily the intensity you do it at. So that is a good kind of conversation, be like, when they're not feeling their best on those kind of autumn winter transition, it's nice for them to realize, okay, I can back it off, and they're not going to have that pressure that I've got to keep going, especially if they've got a big game in the next couple of days. So if you can just put in a humble questionnaire at the bottom, or you can actually get them on a period app that has coach access to it. So it's called the Fitter Woman, and it's basically like any other period app. It logs when you bleed, your symptoms, your flow, all that kind of stuff, and the coaches have access to it. So you wouldn't even need to go through a questionnaire, because all the girls pop up into which phase they're in and the coach view. So then you can just go straight up to them, hey, how are you feeling today? Notice you're in this phase. Let's back it off tonight if you're not feeling up to it. So that's one way. You wouldn't even have to worry about that extra tedious questionnaire. It's already there for you, which you can get in the coach's deal kind of thing. It is, you have to pay for that one. But free apps that an athlete can use is Flow, Fitter Woman, any of those are fine. Flow is really good because it actually gives you, based on your symptoms, they'll pop up with articles to explain, say, why you're experiencing that system. And it covers more than just that. It's got your mood, your physiological symptoms as well. Can put in when you exercise, when you're sick, injured, everything. So then again, if you exercise too much and they say your period is like, well, let's actually have a look, you may be overtrained compared to your last cycle. So that one's really good. It just remember, it doesn't take out the doctor, go have those conversations and whatnot, but that one's really good. But if you're old school, so I started off with doing it in a diary. So I would get my diary and I would highlight when my different phases are. So I have the 4 colors for the 4 phases. So then because I'm fairly regular, I could plan ahead. So if I needed something that I know I needed to be confident on, like a presentation, I would go off the colors and be like, okay, I can put it in there because I know from previous tracking, it's good to put there. So that's another way where you can organize your weeks and make sure that 70%, you're not overcharging your energy, so you've got it throughout the whole time. It's a bit easier if that's how you work compared to you work better with an app. So it's very individual. But Flow is pretty good. I use that one, tested it. I've tried Fit a Woman. It's good. It's good for the coaches as well. I've got a questionnaire on Team Builder that I add to their daily load just to double check with them, because our girls train a lot outside of us. So I've got the period thing at the bottom, because again, if we can red flag that they've missed a few periods, I'm like, hey, let's have a chat. So it's very good to kind of have that information as a coach.
No, that's awesome. So I'll make sure that we put those links to Flow and Fit a Woman down in the show notes as well, for those people wanting to explore those apps. So that's awesome. So another question I've experienced a couple of times is, if athletes are using the pill or another contraceptive method, do they still need to track and monitor their symptoms if they have any, or just monitor their cycle?
Yeah, I think that's a real big thing that a lot more people are starting to talk about now, because they're just more comfortable around that topic. Yes, they still need to continue monitoring it, because if they feel like their current pill or hormonal formula that they're on isn't working for the next 3, they normally get you to do something for 3 months. So if you've started a new pill type, you have to track for 3 months if it's actually improved, because it takes an egg 100 days hypothetically to cope in an environment. Although hormonal contraception stops the egg kind of thing, it still will affect your body in a certain way. So they usually say track for 3 months. If you like it, yep, keep going. And then you can kind of go back onto that. I have noticed people say that their symptoms have changed even if they're on the pill since they've started the gym. So it's good to kind of know whether it was a good change or a bad change. And again, if things were to go back to that default, you have proof on it to then go to your doctor, be like, hey, this has changed. Can we talk about why? So it's always important to track it, just in case something goes wrong, just in case you don't take your pill regularly. Again, you could have that potential pregnancy risk, is sometimes happens. And then again, if you don't like the certain formula you're on, you've got evidence to be like, hey doc, I don't like how this is going, can we change? So it's always very good to track certain things, because things could change in your body that you don't like. So yeah, I would keep that going.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I do know that some sporting bodies have recommendations on what contraception to have. I know contact sports don't like the rod, because if you get hit, it could cause a blood clot that go up to your brain. So that's another thing that you can basically come to your doctor and say this, and this, and provide the evidence. Yeah.
No, that's some really great advice there. So from everything we've talked about, how can female athletes use the menstrual cycle to their advantage when training?
So it's going to provide a massive advantage to you, because you feel like you've got this power. And I know this might sound a bit hippy dippy, but like it does actually. Like I'm 100% all natural. I'm not in any form of hormonal contraception, and I can actually feel when certain things are happening. So then I can already be like, whoa, I need to take a step back, put more recovery in, so I can, be fine if something comes up along the cycle. So as we spoke about at the start, it is your sign of you being healthy. So it's going to help you lower your injury risk if this is still all going to be normal and natural for you. If it's, pain-free, you're sleeping enough and recovering enough. So it will provide you that advantage to basically keep you on the field longer, because you are healthy, your bones are strong, you're eating enough, you're sleeping. So that's a big thing of how it's a huge advantage. The other thing is, after tracking your cycle for 3 months, you'll notice patterns. So that's when I spoke about how you can program or plan your days on those kind of weeks. So if you've got rep trials coming up, or you've got a big game, or you're starting training, or something major's happening on an exam block, and it's in that problematic pattern time, how to be like, hey, this is going to be coming up. I need to prep for this. So again, if you know what's happening with your cycles and your powers and you're in with your body, again, you're going to be able to cope with things and you're not going to have the big surprises when it does appear. So like teenage girls is a big thing. Sorry, teenage menstruation, just say girls because they're not the only ones. They will benefit hugely from this, especially if they look at their discharge. So when it hits a certain type of texture, that's them knowing that their periods will turn up because they're very inconsistent. So if they're inconsistent, but you notice your symptoms are right before you bleed, you'll know, say they're going to turn up on game day and you haven't had it for 2 months, you're ready to go. And you're obviously going to always keep your period pack with you with the pads and everything else that you need. So gum's a perfect one to help with nausea. Some people have said, or lollipops and Panadol in there. So you're all sweet. So that gives you that advantage that you've unlocked your period power. You can feel how your body goes and, you know, stay on the field longer, not get the surprise attack on game day that, oh my God, I forgot a pad. Well, no, I know my body. We're all sweet. So that's a major advantage for any female out there, especially now that we're working more, we actually can play sport and all that kind of change that, you know, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, they didn't have. So yeah, it's a big advantage for us.
I think a great point you mentioned is work and school and exams, and making sure you're ready for those as well, because they're just as important as sport. So I think that's really important as well. It's not just about sport, it's about what else is going outside of your life as well. So yeah. It's a great point. So something that you alluded to before is injury. So does injury risk vary across the menstrual cycle phases?
Well, majority of the research is saying that once you ovulate, because your progesterone increases and that kind of hormonal environment is similar to when you're in labor, all your ligaments are very loose and you've got that higher risk of doing a ligamental style injury. So you could sublux your shoulder a bit more. One of our girls actually did. You could do your knee. You've got all these kind of risks there. I've also noticed that when you are in your first 5 days, you're at a greater injury risk as well. So certain researchers are alluding to certain things. I noticed that I've redone my injuries before I've hit my period in the 3 or 4 days beforehand, because my PMS is all my injuries get inflamed. So, you know, I could be a bit guarded, or like my brain might not let my body move in a certain way, and then there it goes again. So like my hamstring is a common one to kind of go then. So like, I guess some people it's that luteal phase, some people it's like they're in their bleeding phase, could be when they get the injury. Our immune systems are also lower when we are actually bleeding, so we could get more illness that way, which is still classified as an injury with COVID, as it was in our rehab sheet kind of thing. So that could also be a problem for that person. Research is still very new in this phase, but the luteal phase is you kind of go to. So when you ovulate, so it's like day 13 to 21 is your first week of that. So you could be a bit more on high alert when you play. That doesn't say that you are going to get injured. Like if you think about it, on everyone's luteal phase at Park Netball or OzTag, we all have people in ambulances with an ACL or a dislocated shoulder. So we are very strong. It's just have that in the back of your mind. And again, if you're strong, it kind of gets rid of that risk and you should be pretty sweet. But yeah, that's as far as I'm concerned with injuries. But I mean, it's still very infancy. Like, yes, you can go with it. Yes, again, it's just there to know in the back of your mind. Yeah.
Cool. So for coaches, should they be taking that individual approach, or is it more of a group approach to training?
That's a very hard question because it depends on what you've got in front of you. You can probably make the most bang for your buck of an individual approach in the gym if they're comfortable enough to tell you that information, because I feel like that will be the easiest place to adjust them. Again, it's whatever work you can also do, because it's going to be like the programming, like when the new program's going to say get sent out, there will be at very different points in the season. Suppose like, okay, we're starting the new block, say each month. It's a lot easier for you guys to do it that way per se. But if you're going to try that individual approach, just be prepared of how much more work you're going to have to do, and it's whether you can fit it in. Another way you can do it, you could do a traffic light system. So you can still have the program what it is, and they can feel like, okay, I'm in an amber kind of day, I'll do that day. So like the program's up, but they get to pick how they feel. That's another way that you can do, takes a bit of the work away from you, and it's an individualized for them. The other option is, so some menstruators have pelvic and lower back issues. So if you per se have deadlifts on that day and they know it's going to flare them up, what's another alternative exercise that you can sub in on, say, those red days where those menstruators who have those pains can sub out, and those who don't can still do it. So that's another kind of way that works well for adjusting, getting that more athlete buy-in as well, that they can still do the gym on their periods per se. That'd be kind of one where you can do that. Hopefully wouldn't spread you too thin in terms of how much work you have to prep for it. If you're going to do it on the field, like I've said before, if we know you're in your autumn phase, we'll be like, hey, again, just focus on completing the technique. Don't worry about the clock. Like, we know you'll get there. So I feel like if you get more, you probably get more bang for your buck from the gym. And then considering that's also the one that we're trying to get most buy-in from the girls, because I'll go runs for days, I'll do the Coogee stairs, I'll do all the cardio in the world, but it's getting them in the gym would be the problem. So if you kind of tailor it for them, you might get that buy-in from them as well to keep turning up. So yeah, that would be probably my best bet. Again, if you've got an individual athlete, you're sweet.
Awesome. Do you think out on the field, so if you got a big group of the athletes, like, would it be beneficial to say, if we're doing some more change direction or doing certain sprint type of thing, like a sort of hand signal, like say hand on head to say, hey, I'm in my autumn phase. I'm just focusing my technique. Could that be something, say, for a coach, if they're dealing with a massive group and you realize, well, why isn't such and such going hard? And then they just look at you and just like hand on head, and you're like, oh, yeah, sweet, easy, done.
Yeah, that could work. Again, it depends on what phase of your training you're in as well as to what you need out of them. I haven't had any issues in the past in changing certain things, because again, if you're learning a new skill, it's all going to be done at a slower pace. So if you can try and tee up, again, it's going to be hard because certain girls will be on their autumn phase, others won't be, and it's just all over the place. So if you can work out a signal that works for you, by all means, go for it. I haven't had the luxury to do that yet because, you know, we haven't got our systems in place to actually have that going. But, you know, I feel like it was more done for the conditioning blocks when it was recommended to us at a previous seminar, that, you know, don't, like say doing an MAS or a Bronco, like don't worry about the time, we know you'll get it done, so to speak. But yeah, a hand signal will work if you can get them to come talk to you beforehand, or even the fitter woman, you can put them into groups. So like you can literally put them into their 4 groups, autumn, you know, winter, spring, summer, and you'll know straight away that's that group over there. Okay, we just need to keep our eyes on them, say in their summer group that they're not going to do a knee. So we need to like focus on that. So again, if you've got the resources, that already splits them up for you.
Awesome. So what are some of the resources you would recommend for female athletes to explore, to learn more?
So if you are interested in more of the Instagram kind of way of gaining your knowledge, the Instagram handle called Period of the Period is the best one I have come across. It covers literally everything from hormonal contraception to general period stuff, what our vaginal discharge looks like and what to look for as it fluctuates, because that also changes, how our blood changes depending on what's going on, clots, everything. Covers pregnancy and menopause. No one talks about menopause. That's going to be a fun thing when we get older. Now I've kind of looked into it with my master's athletes, but that's a good page and it covers everything, talks about research, and she provides books and podcasts. She gets people to come on and talk to you guys, followers and even coaches, so we can kind of keep that education going. So that one's really good. There's heaps of books out there, and I have read all the ones they've recommended, and because I know she is a PhD candidate and is majoring in women's health, so I feel like she's got a good knowledge of what's going on around there. So some of them include Maisie Hill's Period Power is probably your textbook go-to with what actually happens. So not only does it talk about how we even get our first period, because there's a lot of like biological landmarks that happen there, but it talks about pregnancy. Not many period books go through that, where we actually know what goes through the changes and whatnot. I know that's above this, but then it also covers what menopause is in a little bit more detail than the others, because there's now with sports staying around, people are staying out longer and whatnot, so that's kind of good to know. And then it talks about all the red flags that you can see, like endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, so it's good to know with that. You've also got Dr. Stacey Sims' book, The Raw, where it covers more of a athlete perspective. Warning with that one is, though, it's more endurance CrossFit as opposed to, say, your team power sports. So yes, you can come get some stuff from that, but it's also the master athlete as well. So 30 years plus. But you still can learn a huge amount from it, from a performance perspective. And then any other book that is on the Period podcast page is really, really good as well. But that'll be probably my go-to.
Awesome. So from what we have discussed today, what are the key takeaway points you want female athletes and also coaches and male coaches and everyone listening to take from this podcast episode to maximize performance?
So your big one is to go get reliable information. If you know what's going on, you can be like, oh, so me actually feeling really bloated is actually normal, or my pain isn't normal. How I can fix it is a really great starting point, because you can either take it to your coach, hopefully, if they are in the knowledge of it, or they can go take it to a doctor. And then some books actually have questions at the back for you to be like, how you can approach it to your doctor. So the hormone repair manual is perfect for that one. So that would be a first. Go get educated, or find someone who can educate you on it. And then from that, start tracking your cycle. So educate, track, so you know what is going on, so then you can work out how I'm going to fix it. So that's when you go chat to a dietitian, or you go to a doctor, or increase your sleep. Simple things that you can do, which you will pick up from the education resources that you have. So I've read 13 plus books and still going with what's out there. So if you can do that, you'll be empowered, and you will start making the basic changes yourself, and you will feel a massive difference. And it happens quite quickly as well. That'll be the first ones. And then because you're monitoring, you will organize your life better, and therefore your training is going to be better, and then you're going to be on the field longer. So that'll probably be those takeaways. Educate, go sort your crap out, and then you should be, organized and sweet. But, some people it won't be that easy. You may end up finding you've got a very serious underlying condition, but it's okay. We've got more research and solutions out there for that. So again, get yourself sorted, and, you'll definitely maximize your performance that way.
Awesome. So that's everything I got today. And I think that's a lot for our listeners to sort of digest, but it's such useful information that they can just start using straight away. Yeah. And just like you said, if you can make those small changes, they're going to make big differences to your performance. You can feel better and just understand what works and what doesn't work. Yeah. And that's sport 101, is knowing what training interventions work, what don't work. So thanks for coming on today, Emily. It's been awesome. Where can people find you on social media?
So a lot of my period talk is done on Instagram, my EJ Athletica account, but I do reshare other stuff on my things, m.wilson, but it's a 1 instead of an L. I'll make sure it's in the show notes. So I talk about periods on both of those, but if you want actual period content, it is on EJ Athletica. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and happy to have a chat about this stuff, because periods are the way to life, Pure power.
Awesome. So thanks for everyone listening, and thank you, Emily.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So thanks for tuning into another episode of Elite Rugby SandC podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and rate Elite Rugby SandC on Spotify, YouTube, and follow us on Instagram. Sign up to become a beast today via the link in the description or via Instagram page. Also, sign up to our newsletter and receive free bonus content each and every single week. So don't wait, make that good decision and join Elite Rugby SandC today and take your game to the next level. So thank you everyone for listening.